Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure gamebooks out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're taking a look at Stormslayer, the 2009 fighting fantasy book by Jonathan Green, with art, including cover art, by Stephen Player. Before we get into the meat of the episode, there is a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. Specifically, there will not be a bonus episode of this podcast on the main feed in December. This is mostly because I need to take some time off over Christmas to recharge my batteries and get my mental health in order. But my lovely patrons over at patreon.com/HJDoom will get a small bonus episode for the festive period. It won't be going out on the main feed. This is not something I would normally do, but in this case, it's going to be a bit scrappier than usual, and also the book I'm covering is rather less family friendly than usual. It's important to me that this podcast is suitable for all ages, so I've decided to limit this upcoming bonus episode to patrons only as a crude form of age gating. The book isn't especially offensive or anything, but there is a vein of puerile and scurrilous humour running through it, which makes it less suitable for younger listeners. Anyway, that's a little bit of a bonus for my lovely patrons who get to keep this show ad-free for everyone. Now, back to the show. Stormslayer is yet another Jonathan Green gamebook, and I can't say I'm unhappy about that, as he's coming off back-to-back home runs in the form of Bloodbones and Howl of the Werewolf. He's joined by a newcomer to the series, Stephen Player, on art, but he's an incredibly safe pair of hands, having worked extensively in illustration, including designing the first two Discworld maps. I have a signed copy of his map of Ankh-Morpork somewhere, I think, so it's lovely to see him working on fighting fantasy. I'd say his style here is characterised by thick, confident line work, delicate hatching, and a painterly approach, despite these being pencil illustrations. He's a really good choice, and I think a change of artist makes sense here, given that this is more of an old-school fantasy adventure, and Martin McKenna's work seems to have become associated with the more horror-inflected end of the fighting fantasy spectrum. Player's cover art shows what looks like some kind of ice golem in the middle of the world's angriest game of darts. It's very nice. Let's take a look at the rules. Once again, we see Jonathan Green sticking pretty close to the classic formula for fighting fantasy, which is always encouraging. Skill, stamina and luck are present and correct, as are most of the standard bits of adventuring kit. So we get 2d6 plus 12 gold, leather armour, 10 provisions, a backpack, a lantern and a tinderbox. So far, so good. Intriguingly, we also get a few extra goodies that reflect our background as a seasoned adventurer. Rather than the usual longsword, we are armed with Wormbiter, a magical sword that can harm demons, undead elementals, and other magic monsters. It also grants +2 attack strength and +1 damage if you're fighting dragons or things that closely resemble a dragon, which is a nice touch. As well as a handy sword, we also get to choose 2 items from a list of 4 that we've accrued on our adventures. I always like this sort of thing because it adds both background to the character and replayability, and here there's no special rule associated with any of the items. You just have to decide which sounds the most interesting from the description of how you came across them. So there is an ill-advised back tattoo of a dragon, a hunting horn, a saber-tooth fang and a sun talisman to choose from. Lastly, there's a list of days of the week in your bit of Alanzia. We're told that different types of magic are stronger on days of the week associated with them, which is a really neat bit of folklore. I really like it when magic systems feel more like folklore than science, so this is right up my alley. At the start of the adventure, we randomly determine a day of the week and track which day we're on as the adventure proceeds. It's another nice bit of variance for future playthroughs as well, and a very characterful bit of world building. The days are Storm's Day, Moon's Day, Fire Day, Earth Day, Wind's Day, Sea Day and High Day. I'm normally opposed to inventing new days of the week, but if you make it into a proper bit of world building and also give it some mechanical significance, then I think it's neat. As a little bonus, we get to heal a single point of stamina whenever the day ticks over, and the text makes it explicit that we're generally pretty good at scavenging or scrounging food, so don't need to worry too much about what we're eating in the course of the normal run of adventuring. I have generated a character who I have decided to call Gusty Stabber because that sounds like a suitably heroic name. They have a skill of 11, which is the best skill in a good long time, a stamina of 20, and a luck of 8, which may prove disastrous. They have a relatively paltry 15 gold pieces, and I've chosen the ill-advised back tattoo of a dragon and the sun talisman as my items. Their adventure starts on a moon's day, which is Tuesday in our world. With all that out of the way, let's play Stormslayer. Background here is instead called Storm Warning, which I very much like. And that's how I bested Gog Magog, chief of the giant tribe, and rescued Duke Irvin's daughter, you say, concluding your tale and downing the rest of your flagon of ale. For a moment, the traveller's rest is silent, and then its gathered clientele burst into a spontaneous round of applause, whoops and cheers ringing in your ears. "Another story!" shouts someone from the other side of the bar. "Yes, tell us another story," an eager barmaid enthuses, obviously awed by being in the presence of a genuine hero such as yourself. "Very well then," you reply, and gradually an expectant hush descends over the packed pub. But which one do you want to hear? You have been adventuring through the old world for more years than you care to remember. In that time you have faced countless perils and completed numerous quests. You have built up quite a reputation in the process, earning yourself the title Hero of Tannertown after you saved the town from the Crimson Witch and her vampiric swarm. "Tell us again how you found the fabled sword Wormbiter," a mop-haired youth calls out suddenly, finding the courage to speak up. Unconsciously you put a hand to the wondrous weapon sheathed in the scabbard hanging from your sword belt. "No," someone overrules him. "I want to know how you snared the basilisk of Bonebarrow. I want to hear how you recovered the Wraith Dragon's hoard." A grey-bearded dwarf bellows, his voice drowning out all the others. "The Wraith Dragon's hoard it is then," you accept. I'm enjoying the sense that you are definitely a tremendously skilled adventurer, but at the same time you are very, very high on your own supply. There's a sort of slightly bombastic and pompous quality to the characterisation, which I think is fun and makes a change. You are about to begin your next tale when the door of the tavern bangs open and Varric Oathbreaker, who you know of old, enters. He is followed by his band of cutthroats. He scowls on catching sight of you, the livid purple scar that splits his face in two. The memory of an injury you once dealt him curls his top lip into an ugly sneer. Picking up your flagon of ale that someone has seen fit to refill without you even noticing, you toast your rival's latest defeat. "Bad luck, Varric, but you just weren't quick enough. Again. Better luck next time, eh?" "You want to keep an eye out behind you," the bounty hunter warns you with a snarl. "There's a storm coming. Mark my words, there's a storm heading your way." Your rival turns to the bar, the ruffians accompanying him, throwing you what you suppose are meant to be intimidating glances. But you're not bothered. It takes a lot to intimidate the hero of Tannertown. It seems that for as long as you've been adventuring, Varric Oathbreaker has been there at your heel, trying to beat you to the next bounty, and yet never quite managing to get there first. The two of you are bitter rivals, and there is no love lost on either side. I really hope this is going to turn into a big deal in the book. If you set up a guy like Varric Oathbreaker as a rival, I just feel like you have to deliver on that. He's got to be a significant feature in the book, and I love the idea of constantly managing to pip him to the post to various different accolades. Most recently, you beat him to the reward put up by Duke Irvain for the safe return of his daughter, whose cavalcade had been ambushed by a tribe of hill giants, led by the infamous Gog Magog. You came away from that escapade richer by one princess's ransom, and with another story to share in that old adventurer's haunt, the Traveller's Rest, in the village of Vasterin on Femfrey's south border. Varric came away with nothing to show for his troubles. That was some days ago now, and much of the money has gone already as you celebrated your recent success with your friends and took some time to recover from your latest wearying adventure, hiring the best room at the inn for the duration of your stay. The place is even busier than usual, crowded with visitors who have come from far and wide to see the travelling menagerie of monsters that has stopped off here for a few days. I like the idea that adventurers are terrible with money and that you can receive a princess's ransom 1 week and have spent the entire thing and be back on the road in search of new quests, shortly after that. It's, I guess, necessary for professional adventurers to be terrible with money, but it's still a very endearing trait. I'm sorry, you say, addressing your admiring audience. Where was I before I was so rudely interrupted? You were going to tell us the tale of how you recovered the Wraith Dragon's hoard, the adoring barmaid begins, when her words are suddenly cut short by a crash of thunder that explodes right over the pub. There is a second clap of thunder that shakes the Traveller's Rest to its very foundations, and a glaring flash of lightning bathes the tavern in its searing light. The barmaid screams in panic and joins the other members of the inn's clientele in taking cover under the tables. "What in Sook's name was that?" you hear Varric Oathbreaker swear in shock and surprise. What indeed? The sound of the storm breaking overhead seemed to come from nowhere. 1 minute outside it was a pleasant sunny day. The next, a storm, the like of which you have never witnessed in all your days as an adventurer, is tearing the sky apart and turning day to night. The smashing of tiles joins the roar of the storm as a hailstorm, the like of which you have never known, lashes the roof of the tavern. Well, that is our introduction. Pretty strong. I've said before, I'll say it again, I like being thrown straight into the action. I dislike being given quests to do by kings and queens. So this is a neat riff on that. Starting in a pub is an adventuring classic, but I like the idea that you can then use that convivial atmosphere as a contrast to the serious events beginning to take place. Anyway, we get the first paragraph proper. You fling open the door of the tavern and gaze upon the mayhem engulfing the village of Vasterin. The sky is black with threatening thunderheads, and gale-force winds are racing over the rooftops of the village, tearing the thatch from the houses and sweeping helpless villagers off their feet. At the same time, forked lightning streaks down from the heavens, leaving smouldering scorch marks wherever it hits, while hailstones the size of grapefruit bombard the panicking Vasterinas. On the other side of the village square, the carriages and caged wagons of the menagerie of monsters stand parked. The roars and screeching cries of the fabulous beasts that make up the travelling zoo echo around the square as lightning lashes the tethered wagons. What can possibly be causing such a bizarre storm? Where 1 moment there was a calm and pleasant day, there are now howling winds, vicious lightning strikes, and a devastating hailstorm. People are in trouble out there, but how can you fight the elements themselves? Will you stay inside the inn to shelter from the storm? Run to help those people under siege from the lightning strikes in the middle of the square? Or make for where the storm appears to be worst in the thick of the hailstorm? Much as I would like to just stay indoors and not get wet, I think probably I'm going to have to do something suitably heroic to impress these villagers. Otherwise, my days of free drinks in the local pub could come to a premature end. And if there's one thing I love, it's free drinks. So, we will run to help the people under siege from the lightning strikes in the middle of the square. I think that is the route one heroic thing to do. Throwing yourself into the teeth of the terrible storm, your arm up across your face to shield your eyes from the incandescent explosions of the striking lightning, you dash across the square, dodging and darting to avoid being hit yourself. Test your skill, adding 2 to the dice roll if today is Storm's Day. It is Moon's Day, so we don't have to add 2, but nice to see the Day of the Week mechanic being featured early doors. I roll a 4, which is fine. You skid to a halt in front of one of the caged wagons of the menagerie. You hear a roar of animal anger, and a paw lashes out at you, a paw that belongs to something with the face of an old man, the body of a lion, the wings of a huge bat, and a deadly scorpion's tail. The terrified manticore is still trapped inside its cage. Does a manticore count as the obligatory old man for this adventure, I wonder? I'll be impressed if it's the only old man we tangle with. I'm almost certain we will find some mysterious, possibly insane old man before the end of the adventure, but it is still the face of an old man, and that is still a classic fighting fantasy trope. Suddenly, there is an explosion in the air in front of you that leaves behind the tang of ozone. As you blink the searing after images of the lightning strike from your eyes, you see the heat-fused lock that had been holding the manticore's cage shut on the ground at your feet. The twisted metal pings as it cools, having borne the brunt of that last lightning strike. The cage door yawns open before you, and as you look on in horror, the manticore steps through it and pads towards you. And there is a picture of the manticore striding out of the ruined cage. Really good, really good. The old man's face twisted in rage, the gappy broken teeth, and the tail, the scorpion tail, coiling out of the frame along with the wings as well. Yeah, just a really solid bit of work. There's a nice, very dark background behind, being pierced by a bolt of lightning. Yeah, just really solid, really good illustration work. Its fear in the face of the storm has made it angry, and the monster is ready to take out its anger on the nearest living thing. And that is you. You hastily unsheathe your sword, Wormbiter, and prepare to defend yourself. The captive manticore has a skill of 9 and a stamina of 10. The tail of a manticore carries a deadly sting, but fortunately for you, the poison glands have been removed by the menagerie's owner. The creature is also weak from its long years in captivity, but it is a formidable opponent nonetheless. Yeah, skill 9, stamina 10, that is pretty beefy. With my skill of 11, I should be able to handle it with ease, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the manticore. It dealt me no damage. You sprint across the square into the thick of the fantastical storm and right into the path of the hurtling hailstones. Test your luck. So my luck is 8. I roll a 7. Just made it. Luck now 7. I feel as though if you're going to fail any luck tests, then the early doors one is the one to fail, because it's unusual for most writers to include an instant death luck test that early in proceedings. So, probably I would have just taken some damage, I'm guessing. But anyway, I passed, so I take no damage. For a moment, you are caught in a total whiteout as a blizzard of stinging ice flakes surrounds you. Then you are breaking through into the eye of the whirling ice storm. There, at the very centre of the disturbance, is a creature that appears to be entirely composed of ice. It stands 1.5 times as tall as a man, its humanoid body formed from slabs of blue-white ice. One arm ends in a huge fist of frozen water, while its other hand bristles with spiky icicles. The ice elemental opens a frosted maw packed with frozen fangs and howls at you with a voice like the winter wind. Drawing Wormbiter, you prepare to battle the ice elemental. Are you wearing a sun talisman? I am indeed. It's exciting. If the ice elemental injures you at all, the warming power of the sun talisman will protect you from its chilling touch to some extent. Reduce any damage caused by the elemental by 1 point. However, if the ice elemental uses its blizzard breath attack against you, you may ignore the damage this causes altogether. Now return to the previous section and prepare to fight. Score 1 for my sun talisman. So the ice elemental has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 9. If today is Fire Day, reduce the Ice Elemental skill score by 1 point and its stamina by 2. Makes sense. If you lose an attack round, roll 1 die and consult the table below to see what damage you suffer. So you have Blizzard Breath on a roll of 1 to 2, which I can ignore. Ice Hammer on a 3 to 5. The elemental clubs you with its huge right fist, which deals 3 stamina points. And on a 6, it gets the Icicle Strike, which fires icy darts from its left fist. And that's 1d6 stamina. So this is a really cool little table to roll on for damage. We've seen Jonathan Green use this sort of thing before. This, I think, is a really good implementation of it. You've got random damage, but at the same time, he's taken the opportunity to use the random damage table to describe the elemental's fighting style in more detail. So aside from providing random damage, which is a cool little combat trick, it's also building the narrative of the fight in a simple but evocative way. I mean, it takes up quite a lot of space, I guess, in terms of words, but that's fine. For an encounter like this, I think that's absolutely fine. So the Ice Elemental has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 9 because this is Moon Day. And I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Ice Elemental. At no point did I get to roll on the little table because it dealt me no damage, which means that my Sun Talisman didn't get to reduce any of the damage, which is a bit of a shame on some level, but I'm not going to complain about having 1-2 fights in a row without taking a single point of stamina. Onwards. At your killing blow, the Ice Elemental shatters into 1,000,000 tiny shards of ice, which are then carried away by the howling wind. A moment later, the wind dies too, the lightning strikes cease, and the pounding hail peters out. The storm has moved on. As you look to the skies, watching as the thunderheads drift away to the north, you fancy you glimpse a flash of gold, or is it brass, within the departing storm clouds. There it is again. It looks just like... No, it can't be. You shake your head and look again, but the object has gone. For a moment there, you were convinced you saw a bizarre craft among the clouds, shaped like some kind of huge brass fish. You can't shake the feeling that the bizarre vessel had something to do with the sudden appearance of the storm either. The people of Vasterin start to emerge from all of the places where they had sheltered from the storm, staring at you in awe. "What happened here?" one woman asks in bewilderment. Much of the village is now little more than a storm-ravaged ruin. "Have no fear," you say, addressing not only the woman but all of the gathered villagers. "I shall discover who is behind this attack and make them pay. I swear it on my honour as the hero of Tannertown." Such a pompous prig. This meets with whoops and cheers from the people of Vasterin. You return to the Traveller's Rest to collect your backpack and set off soon after with their good wishes ringing in your ears. But where will you go? According to eyewitnesses, the storm blew in suddenly from the south and when it left moved on again northwards, in the direction of the capital of Chalanabrad. Having had some dealings with the College of Mages in the past, you could travel to Chalanabrad to find out if your contacts there know anything about this erratic weather or the curious fish-shaped flying machine. Alternatively, you could retrace the path of the storm to see where it blew up from, in the hope that that might provide you with some answers. So a big choice on the cards. Do we go north towards Chalanabrad or south following the path of devastation? I like the idea of going north to see whether the mages can help. This strikes me as a storm that's definitely magical in origin, and I feel as though the College of Mages would be best placed to provide answers. Also, travelling south to the point of origin will only take me further away from the thing that has probably caused the storm, the curious fish-shaped flying machine. So I think heading in a way that keeps me on the trail of the potential villain is probably going to be a good thing. 2 days of hard walking brings you back within sight of the walls of the capital city of Femfrey, Chalanabrad. Move the day of the week on 2. So we've gone from Moon's Day to Earth Day, and we could regain 2 stamina points for our travels, but we're on maximum stamina, so that's not going to happen. You have been here several times before, but the sight of the city's open, tree-lined avenues, stunning parks and monumental public buildings never ceases to amaze. But you're not here to see the sights on this occasion, you have a job to do. You waste no time in making your way to the ancient and impressive College of Mages, a building of soaring spires, sparkling crystal domes and myriad labyrinthine passageways, hiding who knows what sorcerous secrets. Being known to the mages already, having completed a number of missions at their behest in the past, you are soon granted an audience with the High Council of Sorcerers, Spellcasters and Sages. Less than half an hour later, you are leaving the council chamber feeling furious and frustrated. It was as if the council didn't want to know about the potential threat to Femfrey, making it quite clear that they thought you were at best exaggerating, and at worst making the whole thing up. But why were they so opposed to the idea of someone manipulating the weather to further their evil ambitions? Well, let them think what they like. It's not going to stop you getting to the bottom of this threat to the kingdom. I feel as though something is rotten in the state of Femfrey, and the evildoer may be somewhat closely aligned with the Council of Sorcerers, Spellcasters and Sages. That's my guess. As you stride away from the council chamber, the door to the chamber opens and a youthful-looking mage with a neatly trimmed goatee beard, wearing voluminous red robes embroidered with golden comets, steps out into the corridor after you. You recognise him at once. It is Matthias Charmweaver, a mage who you have worked with in the past, the last time battling the ogre shaman of South Lendelland. "I am so sorry, my friend," he apologises. "I can't believe the council would treat you like that after all that you've done for the college in the past. But it's because they're embarrassed, you see. They know who's behind the attack on Vasterin, but they don't know what to do to stop him." "Who is it then?" you ask. "His name is Balthazar Sturm, and he used to be a member of the College of Mages," Matthias explains. "He practiced the path of elementalism, focusing particularly on meteorological magic, till he was thrown out for carrying out irresponsible sorcerous experiments, trying to combine magic and machinery. You might say that he left under a dark cloud, swearing revenge not just on the college, but also on Chalanabrad and the whole kingdom. The truth is, from what you have told them in their own magical scrying, the council suspects that Sturm is behind the attack on Vasterin, which means he's back and has begun to exact his revenge. So how can he be stopped?" you press. "Come with me," Matthias says mysteriously. Always nice to see a young mage rather than an old mage. It makes a change. The mage leads you to his private quarters within the college, where stands a stone bowl containing a pool of water, its surface as smooth and reflective as a mirror. Matthias intones an incantation and stares unblinkingly into the mirror pool. You fancy you see the images swirl and change within the water, but you cannot clearly make out what they are. Eventually, the pool clears again and Matthias looks up. "There is no time to waste," he states with cold finality. "Sturm has created a weather-altering flying machine and has bound 4 great elementals within it to provide it with the means of sorcerous power. It is this craft that you've seen within the eye of the storm. If you are to have any hope of standing against Sturm and stopping his weather machine, you're going to have to find the means to overcome these elementals. You'll need to search in places where the 4 elements of earth, air, fire and water are in their greatest concentrations." "And where is that?" you ask. "Deep beneath the mountains of the Witchtooth Line, on the windswept howling plains, at the heart of Mount Pyre, the volcano that stands within the mountainous borders of Morastatia, and deep beneath the Eel Sea. I can offer you a little magical aid to help you on your quest, but there's precious little time to waste. The whole of Femfrey is in danger, and you must be on your way as soon as possible. You can ask Matthias for help with one of the 4 elements, but which will it be? Will you choose earth, air, fire or water, or tell him that there's no time to waste, you're ready to set off straight away. I wonder if that means you can sort of do this as a sort of challenge version where you don't get any bonus at all and still be fine. That would be cool. I think that I'm most afraid of drowning out of all of those things. Yeah, for very odd personal reasons, I'm more afraid of drowning than I am of being burned alive. Don't ask me why. It's just my thing. So I'm going to ask for help with water. I offer you this potion of underwater breathing, Matthias says, taking a sea green glass bottle shaped like a fish from a shelf crammed with flasks. If you're going to look for aid against a water elemental at the bottom of the sea, you're going to need this. Excellent. No drowning for me. It's time you were on your way, Matthias Charmweaver informs you. I will petition the council to work whatever magics they can to lessen the impact of Storm's weather attacks, but it will not be enough to stop him in his craft. That will be up to you. May the gods smile upon your endeavours. And with that you depart the College of Mages. But where will you travel first in your quest to find the means to defeat Balthazar Sturm's bound elementals? The Eel Sea, the Witchtooth Line, Mount Pyre, or the Howling Plains? These are great names. These are classic fantasy names. I love them all. We've got a potion of water breathing, so I think it makes sense to go to the Eel Sea first. Without further ado, you set off for the Chalanabrad docks. Making your way through the hustle and bustle of the city, you could be forgiven for believing that nothing was wrong. Influence of Balthazar Sturm's weather-changing machine does not appear to have reached this far yet. As you continue on your way, you go over in your mind what you will need for a quest that will take you to the bottom of the Eel Sea. First of all, you are going to need to acquire some way of breathing underwater if you don't have such a thing already, which I do. Secondly, you will need to find a captain of a ship willing to take you out to sea. Of course, Chalanabrad is also the perfect place to equip yourself in general. Do you want to visit the city's markets before doing anything else? Would you prefer to press on, finding a way to breathe underwater? Or if you don't need to worry about this, will you look for a ship? Well, do you know what? I am so done with visiting markets that let's just go straight to look for a ship. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's some useful tat to be had in the markets of Chalanabrad, but I just want to get to the action, so let's go and find a captain willing to take us to the Eel Sea. Making your way down to Chalanabrad's impressive docks, you know that something is wrong when you see the forest of masts over the rooftops of the buildings that surround the city's grand harbour. The docks are full to overflowing with all manner of ships, everything from merchant galleys to slavers to freebooter galleons. There is usually a steady stream of vessels setting sail from here for the distant continents of Alanzia and Cool, with just as many boats travelling to Chalanabrad from elsewhere around the globe. But not today. All of the vessels are in harbour, and you cannot see so much as a schooner out at sea beyond the general harbour wall. You soon discover why when you run into a salty old sea dog sitting on a jetty, picking his teeth with a splinter from his wooden leg. Hey, another old man. It's the storm sea. There's more of 'em, and they're getting worse, threatening the seaways. And reports of great eel attacks are on the increase too. If you want to go to sea today, forget it. The day drags on, with you pleading with the sea captains to be taken out. You are beginning to despair that you won't be able to find anyone willing to help when you come across the redoubtable Captain Katrina. Her reputation is almost as widespread as yours, but she is particularly known for her recklessness. She looks every part the Lady Buccaneer, dressed in practical leather trews and a fine embroidered jerkin. A scimitar hangs from her sword belt. Her luxurious long black hair is tied back in a ponytail with a ribbon of Coolian silk, and a patch covers the orbit of her left eye, taken in a battle with a giant crab. Oh, I love a giant crab. I don't know why, I really like a giant crab. I read several of Guy N. Smith's crab books as a young man, and I think that might have given me a little bit of a taste for giant crabs. I do hope we happen across a giant crab in this. It's always a classic fantasy encounter, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what Jonathan Green does with that sort of fight. I think he'd come up with something characterful and fun for it. You have nothing to lose in telling her of your quest, hoping against hope that she might agree to help you out of the goodness of her heart. I know the place you seek and I'll take you there too, she says. All I ask in return is half of whatever you bring back from the bottom. Sounds like the best offer you're going to get, so you agree. Captain Katrina's ship, the Tempest, sails with the tide. You have been at sea for less than a day when a thick sea fog blows up as if from nowhere. It moves towards the ship with a sinister purpose until its sickly yellow cloud-like mass threatens to engulf the Tempest. Captain Katrina looks concerned. I've not seen it like this before, she says. This is no natural sea mist. There's sorcery at work here, I'd swear it. You know she's right. You can feel Wormbiter vibrating in its scabbard at your side. But what are you going to do about it? Do you have Prospero Sea Charmer with you? I don't. Do you have a hunting horn? I don't. If neither of these things applies to you, you have no choice but to face the unnatural fog with your sword drawn. As the relentless mist engulfs the ship, you strike out with your enchanted blade. A malevolent face forms within it, and coiling tendrils of fog coalesce into pseudo-tentacles that writhe towards you as the fog elemental fights back. The fog elemental has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 10. If you reduce the fog elemental's stamina score to 0, the chains of sorcery holding the misty manifestation together are broken, and it dissipates, leaving the Tempest free to continue its journey across the sea. So, fog elemental, skill 7, stamina 10. Might take a few goes, but yeah, I should be able to deal with this very easily. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the fog elemental. I took no damage, despite it 1 point rolling a double 6 for its attack. Yeah, just stab that fog. Stab that fog real good. Now I need to test my luck with my luck of 7. So starting to get into the worrying arena. 5, that's fine. I'm rolling well this adventure. My luck now reduced to 6. After an uneventful night at sea, you rise the following morning to a glowering, overcast sky. Move the day of the week on 1. It is now Wednesday, and very pleased that it's not Sea Day, because I imagine Sea Day will make the various water elementals all the more potent. So I guess that suggests that there is some meta strategy where on subsequent playthroughs you can think about where you are in terms of days of the week and what order you might want to do the different mini areas. That makes sense. That's a really cool feature, actually. You can potentially game it, maybe, if you get lucky, and do your adventuring on a day where the various elementals are going to be weaker than they would otherwise be. There is no land in sight, but the Tempest is at anchor. Is this the place? You ask Katrina, yawning and rubbing the sleep from your eyes. You hadn't realised how much your quest has taken out of you. There's me, literally yawning, even though it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Not quite X marks the spot, I'll grant you, she draws, but this is the place. We're anchored at the edge of Black Coral Reef, and rumour has it that down at the edge of the Devilfish Rift lies the sunken temple of Haidana, god of the sea. Some say there was an island here once until it was drowned by a tidal wave. Others that the temple's always been underwater. Many have come here looking for it, and few have found it. Even fewer have returned to tell the tale. But if there's anything that can help you gain mastery over a greater water elemental, it'll be down there. Undaunted, you step up to the gunwale and make your preparations. You will have to leave your backpack behind. Although it's waterproof, it wasn't designed to survive a journey to the bottom of the sea. However, you can still take your sword Wormbiter with you, along with 2 other items, which you can carry about your person, but no food. So we're going to take Wormbiter and the Sun Talisman, I guess. That's basically all the items I've got that I could potentially take down beneath the sea. Your last act before entering the ocean is to make whatever preparations are necessary for you to be able to breathe underwater. Will you drink a potion of underwater breathing if you have one? Put on a breathing helmet or call on the aid of Prospero Sea Charmer? I think we will drink the potion of underwater breathing. Some really interesting and intriguing other options there as well. Stepping out onto the gangplank, you leap off the end. You drop like a stone into the sea, and the waves close over your head. The weight of your armour and sword drag you down towards the submerged reef. Your lungs begin to ache until, unable to fight the urge any longer, you take a gulping breath. But what's this? Miraculously, you are still able to breathe just as you had hoped. I mean, I guess maybe Mateus did like the meanest practical joke of all time and just gave us some water in the expectation that we'd drown in hilarious circumstances. Thankfully, he seems to have been on the level. You breathe a sigh of relief, and moments later, your feet touch the seabed. You quickly look around you. The sunlight penetrating the water is muted at these depths, but as your eyes become accustomed to the reduced light levels, you find that you can see well enough. Behind you, the reef itself rises back up towards the surface, and you can see the underside of the ship's hull above you. Not many metres ahead is the edge of the continental shelf, and beyond that, nothing but the gloom of the ocean depths. To your right, you can make out the hold wreck of a galleon, while to your left, you can see the seabed is riven by a great fissure. Deciding that you are unlikely to find the temple beyond the edge of the continental shelf, will you make for the wreck or the rift? Let's do the wreck. The wreck looms out of the murk ahead of you, strands of kelp rippling like sails from its broken masts moved by undersea currents. Worth saying again that Jonathan Green knows his way around a keyboard. He's pretty good at the old writing, he really is. The ship is listing slightly on its starboard side, the prow pointing out over the edge of the void. You can see a massive hole in its hull, quite possibly the reason why the ship sank in the first place. Oh really, Sherlock? Really? Is that what you've deduced with your amazing analytic skills, that a ship with a massive hole in the side might just sink? You wonder what could make a hole that size. Do you want to enter the wreck through the hole in its hull, or swim up to the deck? Or you can leave the wreck well alone and head for the fissure. No, we're going to go through the hole in the hull. Below decks, the ship looks like a mass grave. Everywhere you see the skeletons of the dead crew still frozen in the positions they were when the galleon was claimed by the sea. Some lie in hammocks. Some are trapped by the rusted remains of the ship's cannons, while others lie tumbled in dark corners, rictus grins locked on their fleshless features. Making your way through this ghoulish graveyard, you come at last to a heavy-looking door. You try the handle, but it is locked. You are in the right part of the ship for this to be the entrance to the ship's strong room. You try searching for a key within the muck of the hold, but to no avail. Will you try breaking the door down, or would you prefer to exit the hold without further delay? I think we'll try and break the door down. Kicking off from a sturdy oak joist, you launch yourself at the door. The sea-rotted planks crumble as you collide with them, and break into the ship's strong room as you suspected you would. Standing there amidst the rotted remains of treasure sacks and crab-pillaged boxes is a treasure chest of much sturdier construction. It's made from solid iron. Although the surface is red with rust, you are unable to force the strongbox. The only way you are going to open this is if you have a golden key that fits its gleaming golden lock. If you do, turn to the paragraph with the same number of teeth as the key. If not, you have no choice but to leave the sunken treasure room. Alas, I do not have the key. I guess the sensible thing would have been to have started at the top of the ship and worked my way down. That would doubtless have been a more advantageous approach, assuming that the key is somewhere in the galleon. You are halfway across the hold when the ship's skeletal crew animate. You have trespassed within their galleon and must pay the price. As the skeletons come to life, you make a break for freedom, skeletal fingers clawing at your clothes and body. The skeleton crew has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 12. There is a very evocative picture of 2 members of the crew, potentially the captain and maybe the first mate, lunging towards you out of the frame. The detail which I really love is that there's an eel swimming out of the captain's mouth in a way that suggests like a tongue. That's a lovely little detail. Again, it's a very skilled professional illustrator just showcasing what he can do. Yeah, really, really neat bit of work. Fight the skeletal sailors as if they were one creature as you run the gauntlet of clawing hands and snapping skulls. If you reduce the crew's stamina to 0, it means you've made it through the hold, escaping through the hole in the ship's side. So, I'm going to face the skeleton crew with a skill of 6 and stamina of 12 by rolling some dice. I have successfully fought my way through the skeleton crew. They did succeed in reducing me to 16 stamina. Thankfully, the undead sailors do not attempt to follow you out of the ship, but you decide against exploring the wreck further and so make your way back to the fissure in the seabed. So, this is something that is important when you're designing a relatively linear, old-school fighting fantasy gamebook. I mean linear in the sense that you can't go back and revisit previous areas. I was thinking as I turned to leave that why couldn't I just go back up to the top of the ship and explore further? Well, the skeleton crew animating and trying to murder me gives a very good rationale indeed for not returning. So, yeah, important skill to master in creating fighting fantasy style gamebooks is trying to make it feel natural when you stop people from being able to go back and visit other areas. Most of the time it's fine. Most of the time the story will push you forwards naturally. But in a situation like this, where you've got a small area that you could potentially explore from multiple different angles, it's so important to create a reason why you can't do that, because otherwise the player will reliably, I think, wonder why they can't. Top marks to Jonathan Green here for doing the necessary and preventing us from going back. Standing at the edge of the fissure, you peer down through the deepening gloom into the rift. You can just about make out the bottom. The rift opens out like a valley onto another level of sea floor. On the other side of the rift, the shelf of rock you are on at present enters a narrow ravine between two rising walls of the reef before ending at a vast cave mouth. Do you want to descend into the Devilfish Rift, or will you keep heading towards the cave? I've already forgotten what I was told about where the temple might be, so this is going to be a straight 50-50 choice for me. So let's go and have a look at the Devilfish Rift. Why not? That sounds welcoming. I'm sure devilfish are called that because they're delicious or something, and not because they're horrible, murderous masses of teeth and naked aggression. As you descend into the rift, the surrounding light levels lower still further until you see everything through a twilight gloom. It is hard to make out much that isn't quite close already, and everything else just appears as formless Stygian shapes. Yes, much like playing an original PlayStation game. You have not gotten far when you find yourself approaching one of these dark silhouettes and see that it is, in fact, the carcass of a huge bull whale. Half of it has already been consumed by whatever killed it, and the submarine carrion feeders that have been picking at it since. Curved, white ribs the size of roof beams protrude from the rotting grey flesh of the whale's side. You've heard legends told of monsters such as this swallowing ships whole, and so having vast hoards of treasure hidden in their bellies. It is just possible that there might be something worth having still lying in the guts of this decomposing brute. Do you want to brave the innards of the bull whale, or push on with your quest to find the sunken temple of Hydana? Yeah, I'll rummage around inside a bull whale. I guess it has the advantage that underwater I'm not going to notice the smell, which is going to be the main problem. Stepping warily, you enter the carcass of the dead sea monster through the split in its chest cavity. The creature's ribs rise above you like the vault of some bone cathedral. This really was a mighty behemoth of a beast. Suddenly, something moves within, stirring up the sludge of liquefied flesh and rotting fish guts that has collected within the monster's guts. With a ripple of its repulsive body, a giant flukeworm slithers out of the slime towards you, as happy to eat live prey as to feast on dead flesh. The whaleworm has a skill of 6 and a stamina of 6. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the whaleworm. I took no damage, unsurprisingly. Flukes are usually tiny creatures, but the parasitic flatworms that inhabit the gut of giant sea creatures are orders of magnitude larger. If you slay the whaleworm, you find what you were hoping you might. Lying amongst the mess of the bull whale's last meal and its own decomposing flesh is a shield bearing an image of a red dragon. It's not hard to imagine the fate of the previous owner. Taking the shield with you if you want, you quickly vacate the carcass again and proceed further into the rift. So, red dragon shield, very nice. As you progress further into the rift, so the encroaching gloom increases. As the open ocean appears ahead of you, you find yourself standing at the edge of another underwater precipice. Cautiously, you peer over the edge. The continental shelf drops away into abyssal darkness with no sign of ever ending. You dread to think what lives down there. Looking right, you can see nothing. But then you look to the left. Could that be a fallen column? It is just possible that you have reached the sunken temple of the sea god at last. Just as you are thinking that nothing's ever that easy, you feel a rumbling between your feet, a disturbance in the water around you, and then it appears. Rising from the abyssal depths of the ocean is some nightmarish demon of the deep. It looks like a hideous cross between a monstrous crustacean and a giant octopus, and it is huge. The monster pulls itself up onto the shelf with its coiling tentacles and starts to drag itself towards you, 2 huge pincer claws snapping menacingly. From the massive flesh that is its body looming above you, you fancy you see a watery eye watching you intently. You sense that the monster is intent on devouring you, but how are you going to defend yourself against such a creature? There is a picture of the underwater monstrosity. It's pretty good. I feel as though it looks biologically quite plausible, but it lacks something of an air of menace. I'm not sure why. I mean, it's got 4 tentacles, multiple pincers, a single eye, and a sort of spiny hide. It should be really, really intimidating. I wonder whether maybe a small figure in the foreground to emphasise the massive scale would give it more of a sense of menace. I mean, it's really good, it's nicely rendered, but yeah, it just doesn't have that terrifying quality for me for some reason. If you have the Spark of Life and want to use it, multiply the number associated with it by 20 and turn to that paragraph. If not, will you draw your sword or attempt to flee? Well, with a skill of 11, I feel like I'm going to be fine. As I say, it's not that intimidating, honestly. Let's try and fight it. The hideous behemoth lurches towards you, its towering mass writhing with tentacles and snapping crustacean claws. You now suspect that you know what it is. They are so rarely seen that they have acquired an almost mythical status. They are frighteningly intelligent, 10-legged creatures that are found nowhere else on Titan. To some, they are the Decarpi. To others, they are the Old Ones. But those unlucky few who actually encounter them, it is enough that they are horrors of the abyss. Once again, you are fighting for your life. If you survive your encounter, this will be one battle that you will remember for the rest of your life. The Abyssal Horror has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 12. If you lose an attack round, roll 1 die and then consult the table below to see what damage you suffer. So 1 to 2, crushing claws. The creature strikes you with one of its snapping pincers for 2 stamina. Tentacle Twist is a 3 to 5. The monster grabs you with a rubbery tentacle. It only inflicts 1 stamina point of damage, but for the next attack round you must fight with your attack strength reduced by 1 as you fight to free yourself from its clutches. And a 6 is a snapping beak. If the horror already has a hold of you, it drags you down into its beaked mouth and bites down hard for 1d6 stamina points. However, if the monster doesn't already have you in its grasp, roll again on the table for damage. If you roll a 6 a second time, then the creature does bite you as described. So that's cool. You get the big damage, but only if you've already rolled a 3 to 5 on the previous attack round. That's cool, yeah. I think I should be okay. I've got a skill of 11 to its skill of 10 and a stamina of 16 to its stamina of 12, but anything can happen when you roll some dice. I have defeated the Abyssal Horror. I took no damage at all. Turns out it's a lot easier to avoid being grabbed by tentacles and gnawed by a beaked maw if you just stab a guy over and over again until it stops moving. So, we're going onwards to the Sunken Temple. The Sunken Temple is a magnificent building that would not look out of place among the sacred buildings that line the Street of Holies in Chelanabrad. It has a great pillared entrance that supports a pediment carved with mermen riding seahorses, engaging in battle with many tentacled horrors, presumably the tentacled horrors I've just dispatched. A grand cupular dome projects from the roof. Not wanting to remain out in the open any longer, you enter the Grand Temple of Haidana, God of the Sea. There, at the heart of the temple, beneath the golden cupola, inlaid with bejewelled tesserae, stands an imposing statue of the sea god himself. He looks like he has been carved from jade and depicts Haidana as a 4-metre-tall fishman with a tail, scaly skin, the torso and arms of a man and a face that is somewhere between the two, holding a golden trident. On a plinth in front of the statue is an innocuous-looking seashell. Something tells you that one of these treasures of the temple is the artifact you need to gain power over Sturm's bound water elemental. But which one? Will you try taking the golden trident or the shell? Trident, please. Love a trident. Tridents are fun. Shells are boring. Everyone's found shells. On the seashore, how many people have found tridents? Like 8? Maybe 9? Yeah, we're going for the trident. Swimming up to the statue, you tug at the trident, but it is locked within the Haidana's stony grasp. You pull harder, bracing your legs against the statue. Suddenly, something begins to give, but it's not the trident. The huge statue of the sea god starts to topple towards you, and you only just manage to swim out of the way before it comes crashing down on the sand-strewn floor of the temple sanctum. Before you can do anything else, a deep rumbling reverberates through the temple and pieces of the structure shake loose, tumbling slowly through the water around you. You have desecrated the sea god's temple and incurred his wrath. Lose 2 luck points. Luck now 4. Oh dear. You have no choice but to try to escape as the building collapses around you. As you swim for the surface, several pieces of falling masonry strike you. Roll 1 die and add 2. This is the number of stamina points damage you suffer. I roll a 1 for 3 points of damage, taking me down to 13. If you are still alive, if you have the code word RISNOM recorded on your adventure sheet, turn to one section. If not, turn to another. Your head breaks the surface and you breathe normally again. You soon find yourself back on board the Tempest. Do you have a shell with you? Turn to the paragraph, which is the same as the number of spines on the shell. Did you find what you were looking for then? Captain Katrina asks, but before you can answer, the hard-bitten buccaneer turns to the matter of the money. So what treasures did you recover from the ocean depths? Did the sea give up its bounty? Did you recover any treasures from the reef or the rift? I did not. And on that bombshell, I imagine we're going to end up in a bit of a disagreement with this good lady captain, one potentially that will be settled by stabbing. I think it's time to pause the recording. So, I've had a lot of fun with that. Am I going to carry on playing? I mean, I've already absolutely ruined any chance of beating the book by failing to get the seashell from the sea. So, I guess I will probably just start again from scratch. Also, while my skill is 11, my luck is only 4. And I feel certain that at some point there will be a test your luck or die moment, and I will just die. So I think we're going to call the adventure there as a failure and start again from scratch. So much for Gusty Stabber. It was a brave effort, but ultimately ended in failure. I'm going to go away. I'm going to play this book on my own time. I'm going to come back to you with some closing remarks in just a few seconds. Tatty bye. I have beaten Stormslayer, and my thoughts on it are slightly conflicted. Essentially, I think it's really good, but at the same time, I think I preferred both Bloodbones and Howl of the Werewolf a little bit. They form a really interesting trilogy of books, and I think there's an argument for saying that this is the strongest back-to-back run of bangers since the very early days of the franchise. All three are somewhere between really good and excellent, and I think which one you prefer may come down to personal taste. Before we get going, I do need to once again thank James Druitt for the copy of Stormslayer I used for this recording. It is much appreciated. As you would expect from Jonathan Green at this point in his career, the fundamentals of this book are really strong. The challenge level is more or less spot on, although there is a slightly odd perverse bit towards the end, which we will come to. There's nothing genuinely broken here, and it plays very smoothly thanks to sticking close to the core fighting fantasy systems. By focusing very strongly on elemental magic, he's managed to find a nice riff on the standard fantasy tropes that hits the sweet spot where it's all nicely familiar, but at the same time it's got a clear and fresh identity of its own. It's very easy to say what this book is about. It's about trying to find a bunch of elementals to help you fight a crazy wizard who has command of the elements. More or less everything that happens contributes in some small way to that goal. This is a little bit of a two-edged sword. The odd, completely irrelevant subplot can be nice. It helps with immersion in the sense that when everything is directly related to the main plot, it can make the world feel a little bit contrived. A bit of random colour makes the world feel like it exists for its own sake as much as for yours. I don't want to over-egg this. There's a bunch of nice characterful encounters mixed in with the main narrative. You can run into a burly giant who challenges you to a wrestling match and help a community keep their dam from bursting off the back of it. This is all good stuff, and I'd like to have seen a little bit more of it. In absolute terms, I think Green made the right decision with his approach. It makes for a very satisfying gamebook, and with 400 sections to play with, you're never going to get everything you want in that book. If he'd put in a few subplots, I'd probably be gently complaining about the length. I think it's one of those things that keeps me coming back to old school gamebooks, is the way in which the constraints of the format create a balancing act whereby you cannot realistically include everything. You're always being forced to make compromises. If you create deep encounters, you will be forced to have less of them. Create more encounters, and you will always have to sacrifice depth. The same holds true of systems. The deeper your systems, the more paragraphs they'll eat, and I find this balancing act endlessly fascinating. I'm a firm believer in the maxim that restrictions breed creativity. From the 3-chord punk song to the sprite limits of old-school video gaming hardware, there is something to be said for not being able to do everything you want. Even within the gamebook sphere, there's ways to restrict yourself further. Not having a combat system or eschewing the use of random elements entirely creates something that can feel very different and forces you to innovate in your approach. I know I'm not the biggest advocate of reinventing wheels, but I sometimes think forcing yourself into a position where you have to innovate can create something wonderful. At the very least, you'll probably fail in a way that's interesting. And it's something that comes over very strongly when I've been going over the entrants for the Linderbaum Prize, where the paragraph limit of 100 creates a very significant restriction, and so many of the entrants take that restriction and use it to create something really singular. So even though I think there's elements of Stormslayer that don't quite land as well as elements from Bloodbones and Howl of the Werewolf in most ways, I don't think there's anything in this book I would massively want to change, because I can't see a way of changing them in 400 paragraphs without seriously shortchanging the best bits of the book. Structurally, you've got 6 different areas to explore. 5 of them are lots of fun, and 1 maybe could have benefited from some finessing. In the recorded playthrough, I went straight to Chalanabrad, but I could have gone back to the source of the storm and had a very nice time exploring Balthazar Sturm's now abandoned research tower. It's very much an optional area, but there's some cool little details that will make things a bit easier later, not least a device that pays off right at the end by allowing you to have your very own steampunk golem sidekick for a big fight. Technically, all of the areas except the very last one are optional, but you'll have to visit at least one of the 4 elemental areas before you face down Balthazar Sturm. If you only want to visit one area, get in and out quickly, I think it has to be the Howling Plains, because that's the only one that'll give you a way out when you successfully knock Balthazar Sturm's skyship out of the sky. If you take that route, you'll probably want a skill of 12 and a stamina of 24, because there's a bunch of very hard fights waiting for you at the end, but it is technically beatable. But the most obvious approach is to actually do the opposite and visit every single area, and that is certainly the most satisfying for me, though I'm pleased that you can do without the Mount Pyre section, which is far and away the least successful of the mini-adventures you'll go on before taking on the main villain. It's the one that feels the most like Warlock of Firetop Mountain, in that it's a little scavenger hunt through a deadly volcano, trying to truffle out 5 runestones, which you will need to subdue the fire elemental that awaits you at the end. If you don't find all 5, you've essentially wasted your time, and stumbling around a bunch of identical tunnels trying to do the fantasy equivalent of Christmas shopping is just not that appealing to me. It doesn't help that the fire elemental at the end is one of the tougher encounters if you don't have the magic stones, and that, combined with the knowledge that the whole mini-adventure has been for nothing if you aren't able to subdue the elemental, makes Mount Pyre easily my least favourite part of the book. It's not without its charms, though. It does have a lovely set piece at the end where you have a kind of maze with a neat twist that it's not a question of if you solve it, but when. And when is important because the volcano is in the process of erupting. Find the right path quickly and you'll get out without a scratch, but take too long and you'll wind up burned alive by magma. It's a great way to do a maze with real stakes, and I'm a big fan of throwing in little mechanics that only apply for a short time. Tracking an additional stat that can only go up adds very little cognitive load, but it can raise the stakes in a portion of the book, and it's probably not surprising that Green returns to this mechanic later. It's just really good. The other 3 elemental areas are all various flavours of delightful. The Howling Wastes are probably the easiest, being low combat and finishing with a very simple riddle. The Witchtooth Line is really good fun, being an abandoned dwarf mine complete with experimental dwarvish tunnelling machine, which you can press into service if you've made the right decisions. This speaks to a lovely little steampunk flavour lurking in Stormslayer, and I do find myself wondering if it's partly a function of being a post-World of Warcraft gamebook. I feel like Warcraft definitely made steampunk feel like more of a natural fit with high fantasy worlds. I think it made people more comfortable with mechanical devices being a part of the world but not a direct focus. I could be way off base with this as analysis. Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy Battle had flirted with steampunk elements for years by this point, but I feel like Warcraft's embrace of a high fantasy approach to mechanical artefacts definitely brought those ideas to a wider audience than GW's venerable but still oddly niche fantasy wargame. The last area, the one we did first in the recorded playthrough, is the Eel Sea, and it does a good job of being a balance between the dungeon-focused approaches of the Earth and Fire areas and the relatively straightforward approach of the Howling Wastes. I always like an undersea adventure, and this is a nice little iteration of that. A small area that hides a few neat wrinkles beneath the simple design. We met the gruesome abyssal horror, but you can paradoxically actually make that encounter much easier if you've been nearly swallowed by a leviathan lurking in the depths. It's awesome to be able to set 2 gigantic underwater beasts on each other like Godzilla throwing down with King Ghidorah. Yeah, I really like the ELC section. It's quite short, but it is so characterful. I also appreciate that the text gives you a whole bunch of different ways to deal with the problems of breathing underwater, and this illustrates something else that's notable about Stormslayer. It is probably the gamebook in the series that allows you the most freedom in terms of the route you take. Even more so than Howl of the Werewolf, this is a book which allows you to pick and choose your own path through the adventure. Doing the elemental areas in different orders reveals nice little dependencies between them, and little encounters pop up if you do them in different orders that you wouldn't get otherwise. So the little encounter with the wrestling giant only appears if you choose to do, I think it's the Howling Wastes first, and you've done something specific before choosing to go to the Howling Wastes. Otherwise, you get a different encounter. And I love that sort of thing. It's not especially prescriptive either. In Howl of the Werewolf, you could either do a quick route or you could do everything, and there wasn't really anything between those two extremes. Here, doing 50% of the long route is perfectly viable and will actually give you some benefit when you come to the final confrontation. And you can have a bit of fun coming up with a good middle route that balances speed with getting things that will help you with the more challenging parts of the climax of the story. Speaking of the climax, I think the final section is incredibly strong. The final showdown with Balthazar Sturm has a number of phases, depending on how many elementals you've managed to get on board. It's a textbook example of how to do an impactful final battle, with each phase being tied to an adventure you've already experienced in a way that's incredibly thematic, incredibly narrative, and deploys each elemental power in turn, keeping with the ideas that have been permeating through the whole book. This thematic rhyming of the final battle with the areas you've explored lands extremely well, and it makes for a final confrontation that's arguably better than the finale of either Bloodbones or Howl of the Werewolf. I also really like the area that leads up to that final confrontation. This has you scrabbling around in Balthazar Sturm's flying machine, looking for things you can break. It's a really evocative experience, and I like how it feels each time you smash some bit of the ship's workings, that you've done something, that you're striking a blow against the final villain. Rocking up to a room and looking around for something frangible gives this section a unique feel, and I really appreciate that. Now, mechanically, it doesn't quite work as intended. The damage tracking works fine. Breaking stuff adds damage points. That is a perfectly sound mechanic. However, the payoff isn't quite big enough for the number of hoops you have to jump through in order to get that payoff. Doing damage makes the final fight before Balthazar Sturm easier, but if you've got high enough skill, you're better off not doing any damage to the sky vessel, since you're likely to take more damage from that than you would from the fight itself. That's a bit disappointing, but it's a small thing, and little mechanical snafus aside, it still feels like a great space to explore, and it's testament to how evocative smashing up a flying ship is that I still prefer to do it that way, even though it's not, strictly speaking, always the optimal path to take. It's sobering to realise just how much I like smashing things up when I can claim it's all in a good cause. Now I just need a game book that requires me to stay in bed until noon and eat crisps to save the world. If we're tackling the things that perhaps don't land entirely as intended, we should discuss the day of the week mechanic. I actually really like this conceptually. I've already said that I like the folklore aspect of certain elemental monsters being more powerful on certain days of the week, but I also like it mechanically because it builds in a layer of meta strategy that meshes very nicely with the ability to choose what order you tackle the different areas. Once you know roughly how long it's going to take you to get to particular parts of the world, you can avoid those parts of the world if you know you'll be going in at the wrong time of the week. It's something that wouldn't work anything like as well in a more linear game book. You need to be able to take action to mitigate the effects to get the most out of the mechanic. But there is some decent design space in this concept. It would be easy to have a similar mechanic representing the ebb and flow of magic in a wizard-focused book, or the direction that the wind is coming from in a sailing-focused book, or phases of the moon for a different take on the werewolf myth. The interaction between starting at a random day of the week but then unfolding predictably in sequence is really interesting. Combines randomness with predictability. That is always a really good sweet spot to be in, mechanically speaking. While the mechanic is excellent in terms of conception, it sadly doesn't quite have the impact it ought. And I think this comes down to 7 days being just too many for a 400 paragraph gamebook. The way different days make different monsters stronger is excellent, but it just happens too infrequently, even if you aren't trying to play around it. On subsequent playthroughs, there's definitely pleasure in checking your notes to see if it's going to be a problem, but I think I only had to change my plans once in the whole time I was playing the book. I could see a day of the week mechanic being suitably impactful in a more open world book like Destiny Quest or Steam Highwayman, where it would definitely give a little bit of a frisson to repeatable encounters. But here, it's a great idea that doesn't really impact the game much. You could perhaps adapt the mechanic to be more impactful by dividing the week into 3 groups of 2 days and buffing one particular type of monster strongly on each of the 2 days, and then the leftover day, day 7, buffing all the monsters a little bit. That would probably have a bigger impact, and I think it would allow you to explore the design space in more detail in a 400 paragraph book. I like the idea that maybe you could have certain encounters having an entire alternative version that kicks in on certain days of the week when the monster is buffed, so that you potentially get different combat mechanics and also different rewards if you take monsters at different times of the week. You'd want to maybe provide some means of manipulating time for the player so that it's possible to game the system for subsequent playthroughs. I can think of a few ways you could implement that without breaking the randomness for the first couple of times you play, but that's mechanics that are maybe better discussed on another day. Regardless, the day of the week cycle is a great idea that doesn't quite land, but could be fantastic with a few tweaks. I really like it, and I think it's better that the mechanic errs on the side of generous than cruel. Mentioning combat, there is some good stuff in here. There's a recurring motif of damage tables that act to make combat more varied, and importantly, they provide a chance to include some descriptions of different attacks and give the combat more of a sense of narrative. The tables themselves become a little bit repetitive. I think there were potentially more options that could have been explored, but they always make the monster they are attached to feel more impressive, and it concentrates the mind on the titanic struggle involved in facing down some of the elementals. Elementals are great monsters. They're like golems in that they can be an incredibly rich source of inspiration. They form a template that you can nail all manner of mad nonsense to. Once you've done the big 4 earth, air, fire, water, you can go nuts with steam elementals and sand elementals and ice elementals like the author does here. I say, why stop there? Anything that feels even a bit like a natural material can be an elemental. Why not have a cheese elemental or a Velcro elemental? There's a whole bunch of design space there, and I enjoy seeing Green exploring it to provide a host of elemental-themed monsters that sit very nicely alongside the steampunk elements. I think steampunk works particularly well with elementals and golems, and we see both of those here. Overall, this is another fine outing from a man who is clearly the best writer and designer of the very late period of fighting fantasy. It's been really inspiring watching him sharpen his craft from book to book and explore different narrative and design approaches to the medium. I think this book showcases some of his strongest designs in terms of flexibility, but perhaps some other elements suffer a bit in comparison with previous work. Regardless, it's a bold, original piece of work with extremely strong fundamentals and a difficulty level that felt spot on for me. There's lots of messing about with hidden sections that I didn't really talk about, but it turns out that sort of thing is fine when the difficulty level isn't that high. I think I'd still, in some ways, prefer that they weren't there, but if you're going to have them, this is the perfect way to implement them. While I found Mount Pyre and its hidden items a little frustrating, it's cleverly balanced by making the entire area technically optional. If you like mapping a space out, go nuts and have fun. If you prefer to gallivant about more or less at random, you can give it a miss and still have a really good adventure with the book. It also benefits from being much cheaper to pick up second hand than Howl of the Werewolf. I'd say it's definitely worth grabbing a copy if you like this sort of thing. That is all for this episode. As I said earlier, this will be the last episode for non-patron listeners, so I will take the opportunity to wish everyone well for the rest of 2025. I hope whatever festivities you observe treat you well, and that those of you in the Northern Hemisphere make it through the darkest watches of winter warm and safe. I'll be back in January with another fighting fantasy book and another bonus episode for everyone, but in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.